Cassandra asked me to speak about communication in FTD, and I hope I can do it justice in 20 minutes. So what I will do is, unfortunately I wasn't here this morning, and so I'm not quite sure what's already been covered, but I'll only just briefly touch on how FTD affects speech and language and the types of different treatments. And then I would like to more go into that communication is collaborative and practical strategies to maybe assist you, okay? I know we're going to have questions at the end, but if I'm a bad health professional and say something where I assume you know what I mean but you don't, please interrupt and ask, because if you don't know, I'm sure everyone else won't know what I'm talking about. So, in talking about communication problems in FTD, there's a caveat that not all tomatoes look like tomatoes. So we tend to like to group things under a label. And in fact, I'm sure if you've spoken to others at lunchtime, you'll realise that it's quite different for everyone. So it's very hard to give advice that's really relevant for everyone, because FTD may affect articulation, the speech, the sounds we make speech with, fluency, the smoothness that we speak with, repetition, our ability to retrieve the words we want to convey our thoughts, how we combine those words with grammar, reading and writing. Some people with FTD just have trouble getting started speaking and then keeping going. And then, of course, there's an associated problem that speech pathologists deal with, and that's swallowing. And so the actual nature of the changes to the brain will determine which combination of these things is affected. So as you can see, everyone can be quite different. But communication is integral to being human. Across all cultures and all times, people love to talk. It's how we demonstrate ourself, our opinions, our feelings. We use it in relationships, in social situations, and in negotiations. So loss of communication, partial or some extent of loss of communication, is devastating. And I understand you're all living with that, and it's devastating for the partner as well. So when we have a problem, what do? We usually go to the doctor and hope there's a pharmacological treatment, but there's no pills that will reverse the speech and language problems that have come from the FTD at the moment, we're hoping, hey? There's education and support, and that's what you're engaging in today. You are positive, you are at the moment engaging in a positive coping strategy. You're trying to find out better ways to deal with things. And then there's behavioural treatments. And behavioural treatments are one of the best options available in the absence of pharmacological treatment. And that will be delivered by someone like me, a speech pathologist, or a clinical psychologist, sometimes an occupational therapist or another health professional. In particular, after an assessment where I've decided, I've tried to understand where a person's strengths and weaknesses lie, I might start a word relearning program for some people. Or for some people it might be they need a physical communication aid or a computer-generated communication aid. Or it might be looking at ways that we can improve their activity and participation in normal social functions that they've previously enjoyed. But for that you need to see someone to individually do an assessment and work out an individually tailored intervention plan for your person. So I won't talk today at length about any of those things, but I'm happy to answer questions. What I would like to talk about more is that communication is collaborative and serves several functions. It can be just information transaction, where you go to the bank and you'd say, I'd like to know my balance, or you're at a coffee shop and you'd say, I'd like a cappuccino, decaf, with soy milk, you know, something like that. But then there's the personal nature of communication. I know what you mean, how are you feeling? I'd really like to do it too. So both these types of communication are affected by the aphasia or the language problem. But it's not the case that the responsibility for dealing with the communication problem lies solely with the person who has the communication problem. It's a two-way street. And I'm sure you already know that there's lots of things that you can do that reveal the competence of your person, helps them have the best communication possible. There are strategies and activities that make things a bit easier. So just like for the person with a wheelchair, that staircase is an insurmountable barrier. But the smaller stairs with the ramp means the person with the wheelchair can move forward. And it's the same with communication. There are some things that we do, sometimes always inadvertently, and usually with a sense of feeling you're doing the best for the person, but they nevertheless create a barrier. And what we want to do is try and think always about providing a ramp to make communication easier. So with the symptoms that your person has, some things are changeable through problem solving by removing some of the barriers and putting in facilitators. But unfortunately, other things are unchangeable, as you know. So let's just look at general strategies that will be more likely to improve the success of those communications, because we want communication to be positive and warm and happy and satisfying. So the first one is timing. You might see that I'm speaking quite slowly, and that's not to be demeaning or insulting to the people who do have a communication problem, but it's because we do know from people who have communication problems after a stroke that just slowing down the rate makes it easier for the person with the problem to process language. Okay? Just slow down and wait. Providing more time for your person to respond will increase their likelihood of success. And what I'm just doing now, pause. So they're very simple things, but in fact, timing is one of the most important ways, the most accessible ways to improve exchange of communication. Another thing that helps is reducing what we dual task demands. So what I mean by that is turn off the radio and the TV, move to a quieter room. If your partner is still driving, don't try and talk to them while they're driving. Okay, that sort of thing. Make sure communication is face-to-face. If you're talking about something important, set some time aside where you sit down and devote your time to that communicative act. And also, that there, bottom lines, increasing message saliency, that means to try and stress the important part of the message. So I would say that I think we should head home now, because it looks like it's going to rain and we're both tired. You know, you stress the important part, you increase the saliency of the important part of the message. So you can prevent problems from occurring by preparing the environment. That's what we've just talked about, reducing the noise and things like that, looking at someone face to face. But you can also gain attention before beginning with what we call an alerter. So that can be sometimes a gentle tap You might have already done this if you've got an older friend or relative who has a hearing loss. You tap them before you start so you get their attention. Or you might do it with a sort of lead-in phrase where you might say, I want to talk to you about golf. Pause, start the conversation. The person has had the chance to focus their attention. They're on the page, you're both on the same page. Okay, and there's lots of those little alerter phrases there. Can you read that? I don't know if I told you. Oh, by the way, things we do all the time. Other positive strategies, these two seem somewhat at odds because in one sense I'm telling you to keep the message a little bit shorter, but also to increase the redundancy. So what I mean there is if you two are rushing out of the house and it's pouring rain and you've got the car keys and the shopping bag or whatever and you say pick up the umbrella, the person with FTD or aphasia will be more likely to get that message. Even if you only own one umbrella, you still put in that little extra defining features. Bring the big black umbrella. So sometimes increasing the redundancy of your message while still keeping it short can be helpful. And one of the hardest things to deal with are social gatherings. And lots of you have told me how hard it is when you go to a family celebration or out to dinner with friends and you want to still engage in these things. As soon as you stop doing something, you've increased your handicap if you stop participating. Handicap is not being able to participate. A woman called Joanne Douglas, a neuroscientist herself, has FTD, and she's written tips on coping with language problems. And she suggests if you're in a restaurant or a cafe, pick a table like this in the corner, so at least you're only dealing with half the background noise. It's not coming at you from every direction. And large groups are the most challenging because topics change quickly. You know, if you're at a family function and you pay attention, the topic will change very rapidly. Turn taking is very rapid. And so for someone who's having difficulty with, even mild difficulty with communication, these are the most challenging things. So the other thing you can do is take control, be an advocate for your person, and plan to do these events when they're fresh. If you know your person is best in the morning, say no, we won't come to dinner, we'll come to lunch. Or if you know they're really good really early, say let's do brunch. You know, take control and don't make yourself handicapped by not attending, make it to suit you. The other thing you can do, which is really much more focused, is you can actually rehearse a script with your person. If you're going to a family function, or say you're going to something with friends and you've just been on a bus trip around New Zealand, you pretty much know they're going to say, how was your trip? So the night before or that morning, you go through some photos and say, here we are, we went on a bus to New Zealand. It was hilarious the day that it broke down. We loved this and we loved that. You know, you take some aspects of it and rehearse them. And then the person with the communication problem will have a few key words that they can contribute to a conversation if they want to. Of course, all these things depend on the extent of the problem, how severe it is. So the same thing, avoid abrupt topic changes. You can almost think of your conversation like you would think back to when you wrote an essay at school or a paper at university. Put in some headings, some paragraphs. So when you change the topic, change your body posture or signal in words, we've finished talking about the trip to New Zealand. Let's talk about what's for dinner. So put in some sort of signal that we're changing topic, because people with aphasia, with communication disorder, are often 2 or 3 topics back, and that can add to all that confusion about what are we talking about. And of course, again, pausing between topics can be helpful. And I'm using quite complex grammar here, but if you can reduce the complexity of your sentences and your grammar, that will help as well. So in the first case, she says, when we go to Mollymook for our holiday, the beach house we are renting will be next door to the Smiths, but I'm not really sure where it is. Whereas the second text box is broken into simpler sentences. It still contains the same amount of information, but it's not dependent on reversals and clauses and conjunctions. So, you know, our holiday to Mollymook, that's almost an alerter. That's what we're talking about. Pause. We're renting a beach house. We're staying next door to the Smiths. I'm not exactly sure where it is, okay? That will be easier for the person to process. So a lot of people talk about these ways of assisting as scaffolding. Just as you put the scaffolding up to safely construct the building, the partner can put some scaffolding up to safely help the conversation progress. And again, that's the relationship and the interaction being warm and successful. And you can do that through emotional supports and cognitive supports. Emotional supports are basically anything that says, we're in this together. It's okay, I understand. I know you're frustrated. All those phrases that sometimes are hard to, pull out when you're frustrated yourself by, we can't seem to get past this. But if you add that bit of emotional support, it can diffuse something that could become a difficult situation. It's good to listen and affirm comments and understood and what is understood so far. I'll show you a little slide about that in a minute. Just being a nodding, listener is good. And responding to errors by giving the correct information. It is good to correct a misperception, but as long as it's in a non-punitive way. Cognitive supports is providing some factual details for your person to hang their conversation on. I'll show you examples of these and it'll make it a bit clearer. You give information when they need it. You provide some organisation. Okay, you've told me so far this is about our son and you're not happy. And then work on it from there. So put the organisational supports in and give cues in a conversational manner. These are all in these next few examples. Oh, there's that first one. Just listening and confirming is helpful. So the things to avoid are long stretches where your partner is trying to find a single word, because it just leads to more confusion. Sometimes by the time the person has found the word they want, they've actually lost the original message. And that gets very uncomfortable. The other thing to avoid is testing questions. Oh yeah. They have nothing to say if you keep asking questions. Testing questions is when you know the answer, but you want your person to say it. And we do it for the best, from the best intention. We feel like we're helping, but it's probably setting them up to fail when we say, tell Professor Hodges where we went yesterday. Maybe. Okay. So here's some examples of word searches and testing questions and then how scaffolding would work better. So in this first one, I wanted to get a film of this and no one will volunteer to be the actors. So if anyone at the end wants to volunteer to be in a short film, it would be great. So this couple are planning a dinner party and they're going through the list. They want to have friends over for dinner. And he says to her, so who's the other couple who haven't spoken to because she's at work? And she goes, Miriam and Rob? No. And the 3 means there's a big gap. You've spoken about, oh, there was 7, there was going to be, and he's starting to get, pushing her more. But you've spoken about her already here. Oh, all right. So I'm asking, who did you speak about already? There's not a lot of information being provided to her, is there, to help her get on track? He's just repeating the same question over and over again in the same way. And then she cottons on that he's testing her. Oh, why? To remember. And she gets a little bit annoyed. Yeah, we've spoken about her and her son. Whose? Now she's totally confused. So you can see that the long word search, the search for these people's names, has just led to lots and lots and lots of confusion. And it's not a very happy, satisfying little stretch of conversation. But in this one, it's a bit more successful. So he says, so they're available? And she goes, what's the word for to make it and he says, to be confirmed. Oh, confirmed. Yes, that's right. Yeah, everyone's happy. It's solved quickly. The repair is quick. So lots of times people say to me, should I give my partner the word they're looking for, or should I help them try and get it themselves? And there's really no right or wrong answer, but you can see that this, if you want a conversation to move along successfully, it's better if you know it to pop it in. But this can all be negotiated between the couple themselves. Some couples I know have little signals that if they want help, they have some sort of little signal, they tap the other person. Or they have an agreement that if we're out in public, you put the words in for me when I'm missing them, but when we're at home, I'd really like to try myself. So there's no hard and fast rules, but just think about a positive, happy exchange of information is what you're aiming for. This one is another example of testing questions. So the lady with semantic dementia opens the conversation by saying, Friday night, nothing's organised, is it? And he says, well, no, before we came away, what were we going to do? Testing question. He knows what he's going to do. Yeah, had we? Remember, what were we going to do? We didn't say anything. Remember? No, what did we do? This is going nowhere, is it? Oh, sorry, what was it? Well, when we're going to, because your mum was down. So back up here, right up the top here, he'd say, your mother's coming for the weekend. What would you girls like to do? It would have opened up the possibility of her saying, Mum, yes, it'll be great. Even if it's not a lot of content, it's that emotional message, that personal interaction of talking about it and her feeling as if she's involved in the planning. So these are things that I'm sure you all do. And sometimes coming to an event like this can just be being affirmed that you're doing everything you possibly can and you're doing a great job. What you can do sometimes if you have an uncomfortable interaction with your person is to sit back and reflect on what went wrong there. Are there any of those strategies that she talked about, but that I know I already do, that I could put in place to make this work better next time? And you might think, well, next time I'll provide more context, or I'm going to make sure I never do those testing questions ever again. You set a goal and then you try and achieve that goal in your communication. So what's important is to identify the retained abilities and strengths of the person with aphasia. And you do that inherently every day when you're with them. And you can go to a psychologist, a neuropsychologist or a speech pathologist and have it actually assessed. And then a program can be devised, maybe. But you can create a communication-friendly environment as well, using some of those ideas. But for some people, there will be very, very little communication. Some people have the devastating, frustrating, no speech left situation. And for them, I think a life book or a memory book can be the best option. Cassandra's got, I've got two there that are just templates. They're just made up ones. They're not about real people. Just pass them around. A systematic review, which is the best type of evidence that we have, found the most effective way to improve communication for someone with severely restricted speech and language is to have a combination of one of these sorts of books and some caregiver training. And that you basically have done caregiver training today, and a book might be helpful. They seem to work because they address verbal attention and focus the person's thoughts on the pictures. It sort of puts you both on the one page. Now, by creating a communication book, you're recognising that person's desire to still be respected. And that's a very good thing. It improves their self-esteem and yours. It might not be, it's not necessary to have a communication book between you and your partner. This is more for other people who come into your person's life. So if your person has a paid carer for a few hours a day or a few hours a week, and they don't know him well or her well, these books, you put into them what's important about that person. If I was with someone who didn't know me and I had no speech left, I'd like them to know who I am. I would like them to know what's important to me and the people that I love and what I want to talk about. And so the book becomes a way of representing your person to strangers, basically. So they're going around just for a look. And just finally, there's a multiplier effect to all these things. When you have positive strategies to improve communication with your partner, you can tell other people in your network what works and what doesn't work. And they can watch how you interact with your person and hopefully pick up what's positive and what's going to be helpful. So it sort of trickles out. Okay? Thank you.